Hi everyone, my name is Stas, and today I'm going to tell you about the plot of the 1996 film called Fear, in which a sweet 16-year-old high school girl gets to know an older guy, not suspecting that he is a real psycho.
I also know you ain't keeping up, so to speak, your end of the bargain with the missus. Because if you were, she wouldn't be all over my stick.
The film begins by introducing us to a 16-year-old girl named Nicole. Then we are introduced to her family, her father Steve, stepmother Laura, and younger brother Toby, a pretty typical family with a comfortable lifestyle. Nicole often spends time with her best friend Margot. During one of these hangouts, Margot invites Nicole to visit a nightclub. Nicole declines as she already had other plans for the evening. It turns out that her father organized a family trip to a concert. Suddenly, Steve gets a call from work and is urgently summoned to Vancouver. He got a call just a few hours before the flight. All the family members were shocked by the news. Nicole was the most upset of all. Locking herself in her room, the girl calls Margot and tells her that the plans have changed. She will also come to the club. Arriving at the club, in the evening, Margot leaves her friend to greet some familiar guys. Meanwhile, Nicole meets David, and they quickly hit it off. Suddenly, a fight breaks out in the club, and scared people start running around chaotically. At the same time, the police arrive, having been called earlier by someone. David takes Nicole to the roof, after which they use the fire escape. All these maneuvers help the young people avoid the police. David brings Nicole to a place with a beautiful view of the city. The guy shows his good side and charms her. David picks romantic words and talks about his family. Then Nicole confesses to David that he has melted her heart. After that, they share their first kiss. Nicole remembers that she needs to get home before midnight. David calms her down and tells her not to worry about the time. He sets her clock back by 30 minutes. As a result, Nicole gets home only at 2 a.m. She is greeted by her displeased stepmother, Laura, who starts scolding the girl. Nicole tries to explain that her watch broke, and then she goes to her room. Finally, Laura makes a comment to the girl about her makeup. Over the following days, David and Nicole continued to meet. The guy would pick up the girl after classes, and then they would spend romantic time together. In the eyes of the schoolgirl, their relationship was absolutely perfect. A little later, it turns out that Margot is very close with one of David's friends. Meanwhile, David expresses his desire to meet the family. The next day, David arrives at Nicole's house and meets all her family.
So, David, you're not in school with Nicole, are you?
No, sir. But maybe you dub in the fall. I'm just kinda...
He was kind, polite, and attentive, which made everyone like him. When Steve was in his office, David walked past him to the bathroom. At that moment, Margot showed up and invited Steve to join them at the fair. Nicole's friend was acting quite provocatively during the conversation with Steve.
You could ride the bumper cars, you could do that thing where you throw the ball at something and...
David witnesses this process but doesn't say anything. He just starts to smile strangely. Steve decided to stay home but reminded that Nicole should be back before midnight. Before leaving the office, David sets his clock back by half an hour. At the fair, Nicole and David grow even closer. Because of the wrong time. On his clock, Steve doesn't manage to send the documents on time. Because of this, he is once again asked to fly to Vancouver. This time, Steve suggests that Laura fly with him. The next day, Steve and Laura are getting ready to go to the airport. When Steve says goodbye to the kids, he tells Nicole not to bring anyone home. When her parents left, Nicole immediately called David and invited him over. The guy agreed to come over, but a little later, as he was currently busy with important matters, Nicole gives him the code for the front door and says she'll be waiting for him at any time. A few hours later, David arrives at Nicole's place. They spend the night together, and the girl loses her virginity. The next day, after class, Nicole tells her best friend Harry everything. Before saying goodbye, they hug. David notices this, as he has come to pick up his girlfriend. The guy loses control and attacks Harry from behind. When Nicole tried to stop him, he carelessly pushed her away. Because of this, she gets a bruise. David brutally beats up Harry in front of everyone. Scared, Nicole asked her boyfriend to leave. For several days, David tried to apologize to Nicole. He left her letters, notes, flowers, but Nicole just ignored him. By this time, Nicole's parents had already returned and heard their daughter crying. Earlier, Laura helped Nicole hide the bruise from her dad, so she decides to stop by and talk to her. They have an open conversation when Nicole tells the whole truth. At that moment, Steve walks into the room and finds an empty condom wrapper under the bed. The father suspects everything and forbids Nicole from seeing David.
Why don't you just say it? This is all about David.
There's something wrong with him.
But your problem with David, not mine.
He's not a good guy.
After some time, David manages to meet Nicole. He asks her to forgive him once again. In the end, the girl agrees and forgives her hot-headed boyfriend. A few days later, Steve notices David actively touching both Nicole and Laura near the pool. David's strange behavior made Steve suspicious, and he decides to check everything that David had said. Soon it turns out that David was indeed lying. Actually, he wandered through shelters all his childhood until he turned 18. He didn't go to school anywhere, didn't work anywhere, and he doesn't own any housing. After that, Steve finds David near Nicole's school. The man forbids him from seeing his daughter. David just insults Steve and roughly tells him to leave. When Steve left, David hits himself in the chest a few times, after which he tells Nicole that those bruises were left by Steve. The girl is upset with her father and leaves with David. David and Nicole spend the night together, after which Nicole finally decides to return to her parents. And when David brought her home and the couple said goodbye, Nicole looks out the window of her house and sees that her parents are still awake, and her desire to go inside disappears. She takes the car and heads to David's place, but there she sees several other cars parked outside the house and hears loud music. Clearly there's some kind of party inside. The girl peeks through the window and sees her friend Margot dancing with Logan. Suddenly David appears, roughly grabs Margot by the hair and forces her to say that she wants him. Then he lifts her onto his shoulder and carries her to the bedroom. Nicole is in shock and drives home in tears. The next day, in the school cafeteria, Nicole is having lunch with her friend, and at that moment, as if nothing had happened, David runs up, but Nicole shouts at him to leave her alone and not to come any closer. David doesn't understand what happened and grabs Nicole by the arm. However, her friend Harry stands up for the girl and David lets her go. After school, Nicole's best friend Margot stops by. They go outside to talk. Nicole is scared by Margot's calmness. The girl realizes that she doesn't know her best friend. Nicole tells Margot that their friendship is over. Margot tried to explain herself, but Nicole doesn't listen and just walks away.
Not a friend of mine, and I would ever were. Okay, he forced me. He made me do it. Nicole, please don't do this.
When Margot was driving, David catches up to her. He pulls the girl out of the car and starts hitting her. He asks what Margot told Nicole. Margot, in tears, screams that she didn't tell anything. As a farewell, David demands to fix the situation, or Margot will face even stronger beatings. The next day after school, David tracks down Harry, and when he passes through a deserted area, he catches up to him and beats him to death. Then Steve, leaving work, finds his car smashed and discovers a note with threats from David. Steve immediately borrows a car from his colleague, finds out David's address from Margot and heads to his house. There's no one home at David's. Steve breaks down the front door and finds that David has become obsessed with Nicole. David keeps her panties, photos, a bracelet with the inscription David's girl. And Steve also finds a photo of their family, where instead of Steve, David has glued his own picture. This triggers a fit of rage in Steve, and he breaks everything in David's house. A little later, David and his gang return home, and upon discovering the wrecked house, the group realizes who did it and heads to Steve's place. Meanwhile, Steve is trying to explain everything to the police over the phone when suddenly someone knocks on the door. Logan approaches the door and it turns out to be Margot. She tells him that Harry is dead. He was found beaten to death in the woods. And then they throw something into the house. The severed head of a dog. Steve is talking to the police the whole time, but someone cuts the phone line. Nicole reveals that David knows the code to the doors. And at the last moment, Steve manages to lock the door with the mechanical lock. David is standing outside the door, explaining that everything could have been different.
You should have allowed nature to take its course. In the end, it will anyway.
So let me in the fucking house!
David's gang surrounding the house starts throwing stones and trying to break in. Nicole signals for help to the security guard, and he, seeing the flashing light, first tries to call them at home, but the network is unavailable. Then he gets into the car and heads to the house. Seeing David, the security guard immediately gets out of the car and orders him to put his hands on the hood. At that moment, Logan tried to hit the security guard from behind, but the guard dodges the blow and pulls out his gun. At that moment, Steve runs out of the house. He hits both David and Logan. Suddenly, the security guard is shot in the back by another gang member. Steve tries to run into the house, but he can't make it. The gang grabs Steve and goes into the house with him. Meanwhile, Nicole's younger brother climbs out the window and gets into the security guard's car. Calls for backup. A guy from David's gang spots Toby and shoots at the car. However, Toby steps on the gas and manages to knock the thug down. Then Logan breaks into the room with the girls and is about to rape Nicole. However, Margot dares to defend her friend, and she attacks Logan. The guy is brutally beating the girl. Meanwhile, David lifts the tied-up Siva into Nicole's bedroom so the girl can say goodbye to her father. However, as he enters the bedroom, he sees Logan harassing Nicole. He pulls out his gun and kills Logan with a shot to the head. David is about to kill Steve, but Nicole screams at him not to do it. At that moment, Toby, who entered the house, brings the keys to the handcuffs. He frees Laura, and she quietly frees Steve. Steve attacks David, but David turns out to be stronger. David is about to kill Steve. Suddenly, Nicole stabs David in the back with a cane. David is injured, but he can still move. Steve gets to his feet and another fight breaks out. In the end, Steve somehow manages to throw David out the window. The height outside the window turns out to be deadly. That's how the movie ends. It's a great movie that teaches high school girls not to believe everything older guys say. Young Mark Wahlberg, for whom this role is his first truly serious acting job. He nailed it 200%. His transformation from a nice guy to a complete psycho happens in an instant, and that's cool. At the time of this recap's release, this film has a rating of 6.2 on IMDB. How would you rate this film? Be sure to write your thoughts in the comments. That brings us to the end of our video. Thank you all so much for watching. If you found it interesting, then definitely support this video with a like. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our new episodes. Well, this was Stas, who is already preparing a new recap for you. Stay healthy, watch only good movies, and play only good games. Good luck to everyone, and goodbye.